Okay, Amir, we can start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us to this LAVC talk. Before the panelists will introduce themselves, I would like to use my right as the moderator to claim some bragging rights. My name is Amir Naiberg. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor of UCLA TDG, the tech transfer entity of UCLA. And I'll try to share my screen here, just a second. So this graph is taken from a recent publication by IP Watchdog. And what they have done is to take all the numbers, all the stats from universities around the US in the last decade and rank them based on several matrices. So this is one of them. This is the number of startup companies initiated by universities. Since the UC system reports to this report as one, they did not include us in it. So we have layered over UCLA's numbers, and you will see that we are second only to MIT. So we're very proud of that achievement because you don't typically think about LA as a hotspot for startup companies. They also measured the efficiency, or how much agreements does the TTO organization do, and how much money they were able to generate for their respective institutions. So again, we added UCLA here, and we'll be ranked in the top 5, both as volume of agreement, but also as money generated for the university to serve its academic mission. So with that, I would like to go to our panels, because without their help, without their investments, all of this would not come into life. So we start with by self-introductions, and just look at my screen if you can do Helen, Kevin, Beth, and then Eva. Please.
Sure. So I'm Helen Kim. I am currently with Vida Ventures as one of the 3 managing directors. Vida Ventures, we have almost $1 billion under management. It was started, we're relatively a new venture firm, like Beth's firm. We are strictly focused in biotech life sciences. We invest mostly in therapeutics, although our first fund, we have invested in some services sector, 2 investments in the services sector, but we're all about investments in therapeutics. And in terms of stage of investments, we do everything from company start to seed, all the way up to investing in IPO, although our sweet spot is getting into companies early in Series A, seed or Series A with larger investment stake. We're in life sciences and therapeutics. We are somewhat agnostic about therapeutic areas, although, you know, like most life sciences ventures, we tend to look at where, you know, there's great science, great management that could translate to transformative impact for patients. And some of the therapeutic areas where we invest are in oncology, some antivirals, metabolic diseases. We're, you know, fairly agnostic in terms of therapeutic areas and technology modalities. We do have certain biases, but overall, our focus is on investing in transformative science that could translate to major impact on you know, patient outcomes. Personally, my background, I've been in biotech. I've known Beth for a long time, biotech for over 30 years, mostly in operating roles, with many of my operating experiences have been in starting companies, building companies, and having successful exits. I've been an investor in biotech since early 2018, after I had an operating role with Kite Pharma as head of corporate development, business development, where I worked to, my exit from Kite was selling Kite Pharma with Ari Beldegren, who's the founder, CEO, to Gilead. And so from the investment side, I have to say, and I'm sure Beth would also agree, having operating experiences really do help I think it made me have better perspective on investments in life sciences.
Thank you, Kevin.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin, one of the partners at Upfront Ventures. We've been in LA since '96, early stage fund that mostly invests at the seed and Series A stage. We're on our sixth fund. It's a $400 million fund. And we're also on our third growth fund, which is used for Series B plus investing. We invest nationally in the US, although about 45% of our investments have been in SoCal. And that percentage has, certainly significantly increased since when I joined 7 years ago to now, given all the things that's been happening in the LA tech ecosystem. As a fund, we're generalists. I don't think there's any particular industry that's more than 15% of our overall portfolio. We invest pretty broadly across software, robotics, automation, food and agriculture technologies, as well as healthcare and life sciences. So I lead all of our investments within healthcare and life sciences, and we look both at the digital health side, whether we're talking about software or tech-enabled services, as well as the life sciences side, which is mostly focused on therapeutics platforms and tools, automation, manufacturing, etc. That's the quick summary on us.
Great. I think I'm up next. Hi, I'm Beth Seidenberg with Westlake Village Biopartners, and I'm delighted to be here today. Amir, thanks for organizing this event. We have Westlake Biopartners has been around for almost 2 years now. We are focused on therapeutics investing. My partner, I'm the founding managing director, and my partner, Sean Harper, is also a founding managing director. He was the former head of R&D at Amgen. My background, like Helen's, is from an operating role in therapeutics at Merck and Amgen, where I ran development. And we are focused on investing in therapeutics companies, where we have our first fund was raised about 2 years ago, $326 million. We've invested in 11 companies. Now, more than half of those are based in the LA area. We're really focused on building out the biotech ecosystem in the LA area, and excited to be partnering with UCLA on a number of ventures and other local institutions. For the past 15 years, I've been focused on life science investing, both in therapeutics and in digital health. And our sweet spot is really on incubating companies and investing in Series A. So far, 15 years of investing, I've incubated and invested in, from a Series A perspective, 22 companies. So we've got quite a lot of experience in standing up new companies, and we're excited to keep doing that with a particular focus in LA.
Great, I'm last year. Hi, everyone. This is Eva. I run a seed fund locally by the name of Fika Ventures. We're 3 years old, 120 million under management, and invest in everything that's pre-Series A. I guess it's a broader definition of seed these days. The areas that we like are enterprise, B2B, fintech, and now dabbling a bit more into healthcare IT. And prior to Fika, I've been a long time LA operator, founder with 3 companies, Applied Semantics, factual and navigating cancer. Excited to be part of this group and having this conversation today.
Great. So, in the university in TTG, we had about 10 days to go from 0 telecommuting to 100% telecommuting. And that was quite an effort. How did you guys rearrange your activities as investors, as people who sit on boards, to accommodate this new I don't know, lifestyle or way of working?
Yeah, Amir, it's, as you say, it went from 0 to 100 miles an hour on Zoom. And I think all of us are getting used to being on Zoom for a lot of the large part of the day. We've all, I think, adapted in a very, very positive way. From what we've been doing, a lot of teleconferences and video conferences. We're very pleased that from the biotech side, the biotech companies are exempt. Therefore, they've been able to work in the laboratories. It took us a few weeks to get organized to figure out how to do that safely. But I'm pleased to say that now, between working on shifts, moving the laboratory configuration around so people can keep their social distancing, we've been able to regain operations. It's actually a very safe way to be because of the HEPA filters and really use of PPE that's not unfamiliar to laboratory-based technicians. So that's worked out very well. Our clinical trials have had a major impact, particularly in the oncology setting. And that's been a big adjustment for us to try and figure out how to keep sites engaged, but recognizing that there is a lack of ability to enroll patients, particularly those with critical illnesses. And along those lines, what we've been trying to do is do virtual site visits and trying to make sure that our patients stay well enough to be able to enroll in trials. But I would say that's been one of the most challenging areas during this period of time.
Yeah, it's for us, I mean, I'm really just impressed by the folks on this panel and the diversity of backgrounds and industry. So it's great to get all these different and very divergent perspectives. So I think for us, like, we're just a team of 5. I think whatever's happening to us, I think we just recognize what's happening to our companies are a lot worse, could be a lot worse. We've been very used to working in a distributed manner. I mean, we're all based in Los Angeles, but like I know Beth was saying, there are great tools that we've been using all along the way, like Slack, and we've been very used to using video. We invest all over the country, so I think being on video and talking to folks far away has been very normal for us. I think the biggest change has been just, we have 37 companies, and in all honesty, I would say a majority of them are not doing as well as they were in January. And that takes a lot of effort on our side and really trying to help them. And it's not a standard playbook. Like, I think it's, you don't just have, like, you don't send out a memo and say, hey, these are the 10 things you do. Like, every company is a bit of a snowflake, and every plan is different. Every situation is different. So it's really, for a lot of these companies that we were talking to like once a week or once a month, now we're talking to them on a daily basis because the things are just changing so rapidly. So I just haven't been a founder. I'm just acutely empathetic to what's going on and just how jarring this is to our young founders, many of them who've never gone through a crisis before. And this crisis has so many more dimensions to it with regards to family and health, and it's just very complicated. So yeah, so it's a lot of change.
So let's continue with that point. Can you share with us some of the advice that you give to your founders or boards? I mean, how do you weather through, how do you survive this crisis?
Well,
yeah, I was going to have Helen or Kevin or others chime in. So.
So for life sciences biotech companies, so where biotech companies have been hit hard has been with trying to figure out which CROs, so for early stage companies, where they're trying to do preclinical experiments to get to the clinic, it's a matter of how do they find, you know, contract research labs, which many of in biotech, a lot of these preclinical and clinical efforts are outsourced. And then so that's kind of beyond, right, complete control of a company where, I mean, we have companies where, you know, folks are in the lab with, you know, shifts to lower the exposure, but in terms of accessing, you know, CROs and then also with clinical trials, it's, you know, the companies are, they can do what they can, but they're exposed to basically the supply chain and your, you know, vendors, right? Which in life sciences, I think is very challenging, and that managing supply chains is like managing a bunch of other little biotech companies. And so I've, you know, the companies that we have invested in, we're trying to get them to at least, you know, develop priorities, try to reduce the risk and exposure to the supply chain potential issues that would impact, you know, the data development, and as well as, who knows, right, like how this pandemic is going to evolve. There's so many different, you know, scenarios, and so therefore, then how do you conserve cash and have, you know, mitigation plans?
So Kevin,
Yeah.
you're coming from a different industry. Is it the same type of advice, or in your companies that are more tech oriented, perhaps you give different types of advice?
Yeah, I mean, actually what Helen said right at the end, cash, right? I think cash run rate is really the top of mind topic for every one of those. And I mean, even last year, we've been telling them that, hey, look, we're at the end of a bull run now in the capital markets for the last 10 years. And, you know, whether you're going out to fundraise or you're thinking about fundraising soon, you know, you should really think about trying to get longer runway than instead of the sort of pure growth at all cost mentality. The markets have shifted quite a bit more towards more sustainable growth. So that's been something we've been telling our companies. I think, you know, in this very acute time period, it's frankly been, you know, to Eva's point, a lot of weekly calls, daily texts, a lot of the things we've set up before, for example, Slack CEO channels or WhatsApp CEO groups, really didn't see all that much use. And I'm really happy to say that that's super active right now. Everything from, hey, this is what I just did, to knock 20% off my lease, to, you know, here's what I had to do, you know, going through a really hard furlough. Have you guys talked through things like that? So that's been a particularly helpful resource as well. And we also have some functional leads on the marketing ops and talent side. So those colleagues of mine have been very active hosting, you know, various small form webinars for a lot of the portfolio execs, and not just the CEOs, but also, you know, the various department leads themselves as well. So that's just some examples of what's been going on. I would say on the whole, you know, we're telling our companies, certainly you need runway beyond the end of this year, but ideally you want runway beyond the end of next year. And whether that requires, hey, the insiders coming together, you know, in combination, you know, to putting capital with, you know, making the right cuts and furloughs that are necessary, you know, making the right projections on what you think the base case will be going forward, but, you know, what's the worst case, even, you know, 20, 30% below that, and making sure that the company can survive through that. That's been a lot of the planning exercises that's been going on since end of Feb. And then now, you know, beginning of May, we're seeing some actual numbers right out of Q2, and to understand, hey, did we project correctly or not? Any adjustment needed or not?
So we have a very sorry, Beth, you want to say something?
Yeah, just on the probably worthwhile topic on these along these lines is we at the beginning it was high touch, right? So as everybody's saying, calling our CEOs, we also asked our CEOs to call every employee, no matter how big their company was. So high touch was really important. It's a lot of other needs on the family side that people are dealing with that we're trying to be accommodating to and sensitive to. But now we're in a period of time where we're focused on this is going to be with us, we believe, COVID-19, new normal for 18 to 24 months. Mm-hmm. And so now we're focused on what's the new normal look like? What's our back to work plan? We're putting in place a lot of tools that are available, such as monitoring temperature with a company that I invested in years ago called Kinsa, which has a smart thermometer. You can do that real time.
Beth, I literally bought one at the beginning of this.
Good.
It's
there
good.
You go. Yeah, it really works. And now they're putting in, we had an employer program, but a much broader employer program, a back to school program. It's going to be helpful we're working with the UC system, for example, for UCLA, because you can actually, send messages, know if somebody has a fever, it's real time, and create dashboards for people. We're also looking at testing. How do we get, particularly in the LA area, also a cluster of companies in the Bay Area, how do we get testing that is surveillance-based testing? I'm hoping the saliva tests and the spit saliva tests will work beyond the nasopharyngeal test, because you get one of those, you're not going to want to go back twice a month. It's not pleasant. And also putting in attestation tools so people can really talk about if they've been exposed, who was exposed at work, those kind of things. So starting to do a forward look on what the new normal looks like. We're also finding that we are hiring in our companies. We have not put a hiring freeze in place, so to speak. We're prioritizing those. Virtual hiring is a fascinating thing. I never thought you could do it. You can. And so, you need a video, but people can interact and start to think about bringing talent on board. And we're finding a lot of people who are reassessing their lives, like what's important, do they like their job, leaning into new opportunities, which surprised me. I thought people would hunker down, but I think people are reassessing. And so that's the other forward-looking piece that we're seeing.
Great, very interesting. So for our audience, we do have a Q&A chat function at the bottom of your screen, and we are monitoring the questions. So perhaps this one, we start from Eva. I'm getting a lot of questions here for all the panelists. Are you still making new investments, or are you just maintaining your existing portfolio?
Yeah, we're one of the lucky firms, and I think Beth and others are in the same boat, where we just raised our fund too. It's really just more luck than anything. So we do have dry powder to spend. We have $75 million. The reality is a lot of, some of our capacity and time in the first few months have been spent more on, managing our portfolio, but we did do 2 post-COVID investments, 100% Zoom. I know some investors are not comfortable doing that, but we have been, because I think, honestly, the last 6 months to a year on at least the seed side has been extremely like a defensive game and very competitive. And we're often forced to make decision, honestly, in a couple of days. We might get to meet the founder like once, super high valuation. So in some ways, this new environment, we're doing more Zoom meetings, doing more references to sort of make up for the lack of like in-person. And just having more time to think about things has been good for us. It works for us. It doesn't work for maybe other firms. But that's a long answer. But yes, we are doing investments. We're actively doing investments, but we're not rushing to. But we are investing.
Yeah, we're very much the same. We just closed our first post-COVID deal, I think Wire, like 2 weeks ago. And I think to Eva's point, it was a lot of Zoom calls. I actually liked our new process a bit better, because instead of just, you know, a partners meeting pitch where you get together for an hour and on Zoom, that would be terrible. With the more people you have, the less questions get asked and the less dialogue you have. We ended up doing a lot of one-on-ones and two-on-ones. And so that actually resulted in, at least sort of as the one who wasn't sponsoring that deal, it made me felt like I got to know the founders even better in that process. And then obviously a lot of the onus was on the sponsoring partner to really spend extra time with the founders, to make sure that, you know, he or she is, you know, willing to sort of feel like there's enough trust built and feel like this is, you know, the right start to a working relationship. We just signed a term sheet on another seed investment a little over a week ago, although I can't really call that post-COVID since I've known the founders since before.
Yeah, I guess from Vida's perspective, our investment strategy has not changed, because, you know, Vida being an investor in life sciences, and mostly in therapeutics, and I mean, it's really about investing in really good science that would translate to having impact on patients. And so for Vida, our strategy has not changed, because it is really about investing in, you know, science that is about transformative, having impact in patients. And, you know, having been in biotech since 1989, over 30 years, I've seen so many trends, and when, you know, the market gets hit, biotech gets hit, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's about the fundamentals. And, you know, whether COVID-19, whatever other, you know, social, political, whatever, you know, matters that come out, at the end of the day, we're investing about transformative therapies that will have major impact in patients. And so I have to say, personally, I lived through being in the biotech industry over 30 years and having been on the operating side, investment side. I think as long as you focus on the fundamentals, and of course, I know we're going to get into discussions about LPs and you know, appetite for investing in certain funds, but I think this asset class, in terms of, at least in the therapeutic area that I know, that there's still, you know, a lot of interest in this asset class. Because when it comes to having a major impact on, you know, patients' lives, patient outcomes, it tends to, but, you know, weather well throughout these challenging times.
Great, thanks. And last, so we are still actively investing from Westlake Biopartners, and like Helen, having some longitudinal view, I can tell you that during 2008 economic crisis, it's a little bit different than this. It wasn't a global meltdown of this magnitude, but during that period of time, as I look back, some of my best startups that we incubated and started were during that period of time. So it's a good time to really, you know, focus, as Helen said, on the fundamentals, and just know that you have a longer term view, and you know, markets will return, and the need, if you're working on something important, is going to be there post-COVID.
So Beth, usually when you speak with VCs and you ask them about their investment strategy, they're saying, yeah, technology is nice, but it's mostly about the team. So when you do these remote investment decisions, walk us through the process. How does that work? How does the diligence process work through Zoom?
God, it's so interesting, Amir. And as I said, I've been surprised at how effective some of the Zoom interviews have been and the hiring process. So I can tell you right now, we're doing a couple of things. One, actively looking at an investment. We're going through our due diligence process. And just this morning, oh, cute dog. That's one of the, I have to say, that is one of the positives about Zoom. When you see somebody's dog, like Eva, beautiful dog, or you see somebody's children running around in the background, it humanizes them and it makes them more relatable. And so I do think that's been a real positive here. But, you know, for example, we're looking at we're doing due diligence now on a potential investment, and I had a diligence call with an investigator where in the past I may have done a teleconference, but now we did a video conference, and the interaction on video was even more productive. So that was very helpful. On the team side, we are interviewing people remotely. If somebody is local, so this is one of the things we're doing. We're fortunate to live in California, so we can be outdoors. If you're outdoors, it's pretty safe if you keep 6 feet away. So we actually, last week, had a candidate for a CEO in my backyard with Sean and with Desmond. With my other 2 partners, we sat 6 feet apart, and that was an important interaction because you're hiring somebody that you're going to work with maybe for the next decade. That face-to-face interaction helps. So we're trying to find creative ways to meet outdoors and to have a safe environment to interview people.
Eva, Kevin?
Yeah, I think, you know, adding to Beth's points, which are all good ones, is I think, especially at the really early stage, it's basically the team and the people that's the most important. And now sort of in some ways that bar has even evolved a bit further. I mean, I think we always looked for, you know, certainly integrity and competence and persistence, all those things that we all talk about all the time. But now it's really an additional level is really looking for sort of deep maturity, and ability to be decisive. How do they handle a lot of pressure? So it just, yeah, I think 6 months ago, as Kevin was saying, like we saw the market was softening, and we would ask sort of the conceptual, theoretical question, like, how would you handle a recession? And now it's like, how would you handle a recession? So it's, I think it's become super real, and I think evaluating this person as a CEO. And the thing is, it's really looking more for potential, because nobody is sort of born being a CEO. So it's really looking at folks who have a growth mentality, a desire to learn, a desire to be coached as we sort of navigate these really difficult times.
Yeah.
So one of the questions we received from the audience is, what will be the winners coming out from this crisis? So we know that every crisis has its losers and winners. So if you'll have a magic ball, where do you think the investment will go to? And probably very different from tech and life science. So any changes? What's the new wave of investment that you anticipate that will come? Who wants to go first?
Well,
I mean, sorry, go ahead, Helen.
Go ahead. No, you go.
Okay.
Beth, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, so I think, you know, what you're seeing right now in the short term, the winners are clearly tools and technologies that help people operate remotely. So, you know, companies like Zoom, but for example, from my Kleiner Perkins portfolio, I look at what's going on with Livongo, which is a chronic disease management platform, and they're just on fire and doing incredibly well in this environment. Teladoc was another one of our investments. These are companies that have tools that allow for remote working, remote monitoring of healthcare. And, you know, whether it's, I mean, you look at Slack, Peloton, I mean, I can go through the list of portfolio companies that are really faring quite well in this period in time. The life science companies in the short term that are working on vaccines and therapeutics have seen significant increase in their valuations. I think that that is a reaction to where do I put my money, where it feels safe right now. I'm not sure that that's long-term sustainable. We're not changing our whole investment thesis to, we're invest in COVID-19 related products. There's plenty of investment there right now. Over 70 therapeutics and vaccines. That's not an area that we're going to power into right now. The new way of investing is going to be the old way of investing. You mentioned it, Amir. Focus on great teams, focus on transformative technologies that have a high unmet need. And that's going to be, whether it's a therapeutic, digital health, I'm sure on the tech side, the same thing, right? If it's a small incremental advantage, that's to us, that's not going to be something that's sustainable in this type of market.
Yeah, so I'd like to add to that. I agree. And life sciences, therapeutics, investment side, I'm not sure how it could change, because I don't want to speak on behalf of Beth, but Vida and other investors in life sciences, we tend to invest in fundamental science and betting on people who can translate that to really great medicines that impact patients' lives. And so the whole COVID-19 situation has not changed that, although the lesson that we need to learn, especially in the life sciences side, whether it's therapeutic, vaccines, and diagnostic, is the importance of private-public partnership, right? Which with COVID-19, it came about too late with this COVID treatment acceleration program between NIH, CDC, EMA, and a bunch of biotech companies. It's a bit late in the effort, and I'm thinking that if we were to have those types of partnerships prior to pandemic, or at least anticipating, because these pandemics have been happening, right? So it's not, and that type of collaboration, I think that was kind of the last question that you asked, Amir, in your question. How does UCLA help impact? And I really do believe it's about private-public partnerships. And this will impact more than, life sciences and other sectors.
Kevin and Eva, would like to try and guess on winners coming out of this?
Sure. I think fundamentally it's what's already been said. I mean, we're all early stage investors. We look for, resilient and ambitious teams that are trying to build large companies.
Mm-hmm.
I think one sign of that, I mean, anytime you have, dramatic upheaval and really a change in people's behavior and a change in regulation as well, there's a lot of opportunistic founders, companies, et cetera, including existing ones that sort of pivot their business to address what's going on now. And I think more than ever, it's important to understand what is a fairly obvious solution and sort of what is commodities incremental versus what is really something that longer term is sustainable and can actually build you into a meaningful independent company. And we talk a lot about virtual care already, but as just a simple example, there's plenty of companies who can do virtual care, and WebRTC protocols are not as hard to implement as they used to be. If you're yet another telemedicine operator, I mean, what is the reason why you wouldn't be able to win accounts versus an incumbent like a teledoc, right? Versus if you're thinking a little bit deeper about, hey, what is really the pain points for a doctor? Is it purely being able to get on video with their patients, or does it come with a lot of things that happens pre and post the visit as well, in terms of, you know, how do you figure out who's the right patient to see at the right time? How do you bill for those things? How do you make sure you get the right reimbursement coverage? I mean, there's a much deeper layer around a lot of these fairly obvious solutions that you can build into something that's more end-to-end and more holistic. And that to me is just one way to suss out, you know, if the founders are purely just reacting versus they actually have a vision for, you know, what these changes are enabling. Because yes, the regulation allowing providers to practice, you know, more easily across state lines and prescribe across state lines, and that are encouraging, you know, the commercial payers, et cetera, to have more reimbursement codes for telemedicine. That's the obvious stuff. Thinking a couple steps ahead of that to figure out, you know, what kind of longer term business you can build through that. That's the harder piece. And then aside from that, I mean, similarly on the life sciences side, we haven't adjusted at all what we're looking for. I mean, these fundamental breakthroughs and technologies take a long time to develop, to, you know, test through preclinical and clinical, and we're certainly not looking to just rush into look at stuff around COVID, because that's top of mind right now. There's already plenty of solutions out there. And then I guess just the last quick piece, I think Beth brought this up in the beginning, which is really, if people's behaviors are shifting, and you see that across, I think, all of our portfolios, where you see some of them are coming out of COVID thinking, why don't we just be distributed permanently, right? And maybe, hey, we'll just have a, you know, office space that we can meet in once a week for the people who want to, but otherwise let's see if we can actually make this, you know, a permanent transition, and that we think might be a better solution for attracting talent, you know, not just within a 100-mile radius, but globally. I think you are seeing an explosion of tools to help people with that kind of remote collaboration. And I think there's some interesting threads there. I think, frankly, where people have done this for much longer, and I play a lot of video games, that's one of the other things I do spend time on. You can see a lot of the social play and behaviors and a lot of technologies that's been used, whether it's voice chat, literally, you know, 10 years ago, that was already predominant in gaming, et cetera. You can see some of those, you know, the consumerization of enterprise software continuing, and I think there's some interesting opportunities there to see what can cross over from the consumer side, and especially on the gaming side, into enterprise.
Right. So in some ways, right, like there's how to, you know, respond to the COVID-19 crisis across, you know, different sectors, right? And then how do we move on after that? And then, so Amir, I mean, if you can, because there's still so many issues related to how we address, you know, COVID-19 crisis and how we move on. I think that's an important kind of topic that I thought we would be discussing, right? And yeah, as how it impacts innovation with universities, how it impacts the society, and then bringing it back to, you know, venture investing, whether you have a you know, audience or speakers here, investors who, two of us come from, you know, life sciences investment, and then with, you know, Kevin and Eva from the different investing perspectives. So I guess I'm just curious as to, do you, I mean, Amir, think that they're different tracks, or I'm just curious as to how we're looking at kind of this entire scenario of investing across the different sectors. Because I do believe that, you know, the impact is a bit different across different sectors, because based on everything that I know with limited partners on the biotech side, our practices are like our fundamental assumptions as to how we invest has not changed, because it's about the basic, science, people, how that may translate into the clinic and companies. So
I think what we're seeing, we have had our busiest month ever in recorded history of our computerized system. We have signed more deal between March 15th to April 15th than ever before in a single month. And this comes from the dedication of the team, but also I think from the fact that it became much easier to get a hold of people like you, because nobody's traveling. So the turnaround time became much quicker, and people were committed to complete deals. We in my team we do place a lot of emphasis on COVID-19 and try to push as many things as we can out the door as a response to the pandemic. But we're mostly driven by the way the university will manage itself. So as soon as the university is recently back online, we'll again be much broader in our perspective and try to address many other needs. So right now we're trying to solve one problem at a time, and the most burning problem is COVID-19. And in many aspects, like PPE, we just dedicated a lot of IP to the public, just putting it in a royalty-free, open source type of programs, so everybody can share and use them. It's a totally different model for tech transfer, but we have to move and help humanity that way, and we're very happy to be able to do that. So Eva, we start with you. What do you see in your fund? What's up? What are the new trends that are coming?
Yeah, I think the challenge, honestly, is to tease apart companies that are getting a bump from COVID, where they're doing great, and the ones that have really long-term potential but maybe hit in the near term. So as we look at new companies, that's one thing that we're trying to tease apart from the team, the product vision, the balance sheet. Because this pandemic, the one thing it's taught me is it's really a lottery. It's not rational, like what the winners and losers, at least in the short term, in the next couple of years, are going to be. I don't think anybody could plan for their operating model to go to zero. I don't think that's in anybody's scenario planning. So I think sadly, in the short term, some great companies will go away that had very viable businesses. But in the long term, I think, we're a little fortunate that because we do enterprise software, a lot of the stuff is sold to unsexy enterprise corporations, and we are basically working a lot of things like supply chain and manufacturing. So in many of these legacy companies, they're now really pressured to change even faster than before. So when they thought they had a 3, 4 year, 5 year timeline to bring everything into the cloud, for example, today they're like, oh, we might have to do that a lot faster. So that's the really positive stuff. But really the tactical day-to-day is the buying behaviors have changed. So it's really teasing apart in the next couple of years, for a young company that's breaking into the market with a brand new product, have a great prototype. It's going to be hard for a lot of them, right? Because there's a flight to quality. They want to go back to Oracle and IBM, and they don't want to try some fandangle thing with a company that only has 12 months of runway. So that's the reality on the ground. And so for us, it's really trying to still figure it out. We don't have all the answers, but as we look at every individual company, including the ones that have some of them have 2 months of runway left, but they have a great business, and do we back that or not? So it's stuff like that we're trying to figure out as a fund and learning.
So one of the questions we received through the Q&A function is, with other markets, I guess foreign markets are opening up faster than the US. Are you encouraging your CEOs to look for collaboration in those markets and become more international rather than US centric?
We don't do a lot in foreign markets right now, so.
Yeah, not really. Again, I mean, one of our investments is Bird. They're already in foreign markets, right? And Europe in particular, which was a pretty heated battleground for a lot of the scooter companies. To your point, they're opening up faster. The timelines on their thinking on micromobility is completely shifted, favorably, right, for those companies than it has. But again, I think the international angle for us more falls into if it's just an opportunistic thing, how meaningful is that, and is that just a distraction versus is that actually already built into your business model and something you're looking to go after?
We're seeing, Amir, in some companies where foreign markets are looking to us for innovation, and so that's been, somewhat of a trend where in the past they may have relied on their local innovation. They're reaching into the U.S. But we're not in a position to say, focus outside of the U.S. because economies are opening up faster. I think that's just a matter of the wave and sort of where it hit first.
I don't know if you read the latest PitchBook report, but they kind of projected that valuation and volume of venture capital deals will go down. So do you see that already happening? That valuation of companies are being cut, and if you do, any advice to founders who may find themselves cut out of their own companies?
The memo, and still want these crazy valuations. But we definitely are seeing, and usually I think venture is a bit lagging behind public markets, even though the public markets oddly have been doing quite well, which is hard to explain. But I think the surveys of a lot of venture firms, I think First Republic Bank has done some really good research. It seems like most people are seeing a slide in valuation as well as in the volume of deals being done. We've definitely seen of the few deals that we've done, we've gotten a price advantage of maybe about 20-25%. Again, the sample size is still very small, but we're definitely seeing a trend that way.
Yeah, very much the same. I think it just, obviously the growth stage companies are particularly hit. And you see that in the news, every day or every other day. I think as you go earlier and earlier, the impact is less. And it's a combination of price decreasing as well as the rounds getting smaller, right? Like, are people still willing to fund $20 million Series A's on, pre-traction or less than $1 million AR companies? No, right? And if a founder is still out there trying to raise that round, good luck to him and her. And so both of those, we've seen both of those retrench a bit, call it in that 20%-ish range. Seed rounds and pre-seed rounds are affected at least just because, we're talking about smaller numbers to begin with. I mean, sometimes it fundamentally doesn't really make sense to go even significantly lower in pricing because that's just so much dilution for the founders at such an early stage for a smaller amount of capital. We've actually, both the CDOs that we did / we ended up opting for slightly larger rounds, actually, mainly so that they can also get, 2.5 to 3 years runway as opposed to, just the typical 1.5 to 2 years. And along those lines, I mean, they raised more money, they got the price, overall, they suffered maybe worse dilutions than they hoped for, but they got more dollars for it, right? And they can have longer runway, and that was a worthwhile trade-off, at least for those founders.
So Beth and Helen, we've seen some huge life science funds raising, closing new funds in the last month or so. Is it different in the life science side of the house?
Well, so I guess from my perspective, so on a macro level, initially the biotech public companies took a hit, which then drove, at least from my perspective, some of the private investment deals where we felt as though we can, get some sort of discount, but I think it has to do with life sciences, and I'm interested to hear from Beth. But, when the COVID-19 happened, as with the rest of the public companies, biotech sector got hit hard. But then immediately it has bounced back to some of the public companies to valuations where we're like, whoa, like that's, but at least based on my experience with having been in the biotech industry over 30 years, that, you know, that there's definitely a trend and being impacted by the rest of the market outside of biotech. And so when I look at, you know, I understand what you had reported in terms of what is that, but at least the data that we have, at least in terms of, you know, life sciences, therapeutics investments, that it has not had that much of an impact in terms of investments. And at least from Vida's perspective and life science perspective, if it's all about the fundamentals, about the science and management and potential impact for patients, then, you know, we can weather these markets as we have done in the past over and over. And so it's really about the fundamentals of companies, you know, where there's just really great science and people who can translate that to, you know, therapeutics and unmet needs. I mean, that's really been the fundamentals for, you know, life sciences investing. And regardless of the market trends, yes, you know, some of our portfolio companies, we're going through, you know, cash conservation, especially for, you know, biotech companies where we have companies that are conducting clinical trials and they're being hit hard, right? Because the hospitals globally are focused more on COVID patients versus, you know, cancer patients or other patients under enrollment. Yeah, so Beth, I'm interested in hearing your perspective.
Yeah, I think your question, Amir, about large funds being raised recently, it is pretty amazing, right? You're in the middle of a pandemic and, you know, I think it was $4.5 billion worth of funds flowing to life science investors. I think that that's a reflection of the fundamental opportunity in life sciences. We've talked a lot about the golden age of biotechnology. There's a non-linear increase in science and innovation. If you go to most of the university laboratories and say, where is the bulk of innovation coming from, it'll be on the biology side. So I think that's what's driving a lot of the funds. And to Helen's point, over time, biotech has been, relatively speaking, recession-proof because the fund of human health tools and technologies will be in place now and post-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
As we approach the end of our hour, as a last question, I'd like to start with Eva, and that's, you know, LA is so diverse. Any advice from you for first-time entrepreneurs, you know, has been furloughed or perhaps fired and trying to go down this road? How do you get started?
I guess, I mean, I think, to be brutally honest, I think it's actually harder now to start a company potentially. So I think it really is doing a lot of self-reflection, to make sure you want to do this and that you're really like excited to solve this problem in sort of the bumpy roads ahead. It's harder now than it was 6 months ago. So I think some of that, when I talk to very young founders, like maybe right out of college, and they, you know, want to be entrepreneur, I'm very encouraging, but I do ask a lot of second order questions of why. Like, why do you want to do this? And what do you expect this type of life to look like? And as you go further and I explain some of the realities, they're like, oh, wow, that's really hard. Maybe I'll wait a couple of years. So, you know, I think LA is wonderful in that we are very diverse, Amir. And I think I wanted to point out, and I know we're at the top of the hour, is what is really sort of awoken in me in watching sort of LA as a city is it feels, and not just city, the country and the world in general, it's all the inequities that has always been around for decades. I feel like it now is like shoved into our face. And the people who don't have, the people who are most vulnerable, the situation has just gotten so much worse for them. And I think whatever we can do as an ecosystem, as a community to help those folks, you know, our neighbors in LA, many are suffering because they don't have access to any of the federal resources. They don't know how to get these loans. Like they're just in desperate straits, and it's just gotten so much worse. So really thinking about that as a community, how to help. And secondarily, the one thing we've been researching is trying to understand whether underrepresented founders, whether it's gender, race, are disproportionately affected by this crisis. So we don't know yet. I think we're looking to do some research under the All Raise nonprofit umbrella. But our hypothesis is, you know, I think women, people of color are disproportionately impacted for a variety of potential reasons, whether it's systemic bias, you know, women not having a network to like the right banks to get the PPP, and or at home they have a disproportionate sort of work at home with family, and they have, you know, and all that that's been affecting. So I think those are things that have been very top of mind for me as we sort of go through the next couple of years, is really thinking about that and how we could come together as a community in LA to like really try to, you know, work on some of these things.
Thank you. I think that's great food for thought to end our webinar. So Eva, Beth, Helen, and Kevin, already thank you very much for your time. And we had about 100 people that joined us, so thank them for their time. And join us again for the rest of our webinar series. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Amir.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.